And fortunately, Tuesday here on the Morning Show means Ben Swann, Fox 19's Ben Swann. He does a special segment called Reality Check, where he does, in fact, check the reality of what's going on in the world. Welcome back to the program, Ben. Always good to have you on.
Brian, thanks for having me on.
One of the topics you wanted to talk about today, the so-called internet safety bills like Stop Online Privacy Act, these well-intentioned things that always seem to have some really nefarious reality lurking in the background. What did you learn about this?
Well, obviously the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, and then it's kind of the sister bill, PIPA, they were making their way through the House and the Senate, and there was such a public outcry about these bills because they're so overreaching. Lawmakers backed away from them.
Well, they are overreaching, and the other component of it, I was glad to see those things went the way of the dodo bird, but as you're going to point out, they didn't go completely away. There are other ones, but
it never goes away.
They didn't really define anything well. It was all real nebulous and loosey-goosey and it just means that this, and you're going to trust a politician to tell you what a law is supposed to mean when you read it, when it's not evident on its face. I think that's a huge, huge problem.
But that's the way every bill seems to be written these days.
Yeah.
Every bill that you see coming across through the Congress are these bills that are, first of all, way too long and complicated for anyone to understand.
Yeah, we learned that the other day with Obamacare. The Supreme Court wasn't real thrilled with that one either.
Yeah, I mean, the content of these bills is very confusing, and then there's all these additional things. So, for instance, SOPA and PIPA are gone, but now there's this new thing called CISPA, and it is the Cyber Intelligence Sharing Act, and essentially what it allows the government to do, though, is to, again, protect intellectual property and to protect those rights and all this stuff that they say they're doing that's well-meaning. Listen, if you say to people they're going to cut down on internet hackers and they're going to stop people from pirating movies, most Americans are for it. That's fine. What they fail to mention is that the bill allows for the government to begin sharing and storing information based upon your internet activity.
Right.
And then so they'll hold it, they'll keep it, and then but here's the thing, the way that these bills are written allows for them to store this stuff and to hold it and to use it for whatever purposes they deem as appropriate. So it has nothing to do at that point with piracy or intellectual property rights. Now it has to do with the NSA or any of these groups being able to store your information online and saying, well, we're going to hold on to it and we'll use it at some point in whatever way that we deem necessary. Well, again, as you mentioned, it's this very wide net that's being thrown out there of authority for the government to say, we're going to pretty much do whatever we want, and there's no, kind of concept of personal privacy or expectation of privacy. They don't believe that you have that.
That, to me, when that has never been resolved yet, has it, Ben? I mean, the idea of the Fourth Amendment applying to your papers, your things that you happen to maybe store on the cloud, for example, are they? I mean, if you're in your mind, you are putting something and information out there, you're exchanging it, and it's secure, and you believe it to be secure. I'm just putting it on a secure browser, no one can get in. I've gotten password protection, yada yada yada, but the person storing it for you, whether it's Google or Yahoo or some other entity, has this relationship with the government where they have to share it. That's one may argue, a violation of your constitutional rights of privacy, invasion of privacy.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge problem. Here's something interesting, too, and I just found this out yesterday, but it was announced that Netflix, you know what Netflix is?
Yeah.
Just started their own political action committee called FlixPack, and they have started it for the purpose of giving money to politicians in order to push through either a CISPA or a PIPA or a SOPA bill.
All right, well, I'm going to have to cancel my subscription then, aren't I?
You got to look that up. I mean, it's crazy that they're doing this. And see, this is another issue. And the Supreme Court, obviously, allowing for these political action committees to be formed. But I tell you, I mean, talk about the political process in this country when all these groups are putting money just to buy politicians to push through their own individual legislation. We know it's been happening for a long time. I guess the only difference now is it's a little more transparent.
It is, and isn't it? Oh, back to the internet, Ben Swann. It's transparent, and we get this information, and we can see it. We can download it easily from even government website that actually post the information and the proposed legislation there. You don't need someone to filter through it like Dan Rather or somebody, or Walter Cronkite, telling you what you need to know and what you don't.
But what I think that's where a lot of people are very concerned about what ultimately these internet bills mean, is that ultimately it looks like you're going to have this huge crackdown on information on the internet, and you will, because what happens is, every time somebody puts out a little piece of information, and then you know how it works. You put something out, and it's grabbed by 100 different sources, and they send it out in all their different areas, and that's how things go viral. Well, under this deal, if you want to prevent things from going viral, all you have to say is anything I put on the internet. So if we put reality check on the internet, which we do, that's intellectual property. If somebody picks it up and puts it on YouTube or shares it or spreads it around, the feds could actually come in, even without me complaining, and say, hey, you're stealing intellectual property, and they could shut down any website that it appears on. And it's not just removing that clip. It's the entire website under these bills can be shut down permanently because of the fact that they used intellectual property that was not there.
And that's frightening, Ben, and I'll tell you what. You have the ability to go after someone who improperly takes your copywritten material. You don't need the federal government to go in and do it for you. I immediately think of the TSA, for example, providing security on the taxpayer dollars back when the airlines could do it themselves. Ben, can you stick around for another segment? Because I want to find out about our credit downgrade.
Yeah, let's do that.
837, 55 KRC, the talk station. More with Ben Swann, Fox 19 Reality Check.
A return on your listening investment. From the Steve Perrin Coordinated Financial Planning Studios, this is 55 KRC, the talk station.
841, 55 KRC, the talk station. Brian Thomas here. And so glad to have back on the program Fox 19's Ben Swann. He does a segment called Reality Check, and we always do get a reality check when he does the segment. You can find him online, as you mentioned before. And, Ben, you did it, or you want to talk about the U.S. credit downgrade. I know this ends up costing the United States lots and lots of money when we get downgraded because the cost of borrowing goes up.
It does. And, this was almost like a non-story late last week when Egan-Jones downgraded the U.S. credit rating. Again, it's now their second downgrade. They did one last year just before Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit rating.
Right.
It was Egan-Jones who first did it. They were the first company to do it. And they didn't get a whole lot of press because they're not as big as some of the others. But then again, they've done it again this year and downgraded the U.S. And the reason they cited for it was pretty simple, that the debt to GDP ratio is it's too high. The debt continues to grow. Our GDP is not growing. And, we're looking at these ratios that are just unsustainable, and so we've been downgraded again. The story was treated, though, almost like a non-story, and it's so frustrating to me because remember last year, this was a huge issue, and in 2010, a lot of folks were talking about it.
Yeah.
Last year it was this big deal over, should we be cutting? We got to cut. We got to stop spending. You're not hearing any of that discussion anymore.
Well,
who's talking about that?
Wasn't the last time this came up, Ben, was in the context of a heated debate over the debt ceiling. It happened to be that Moody's and I guess Egan-Jones both happened to downgrade the United States at the time that debate was raging or shortly thereafter, and the Democrats went on and were screaming about it that it had something to do with that, when in fact all of the reasons for downgrading were the ones that were just cited again by Egan-Jones, which is our debt to GDP ratio, which has everything to do with spending.
Right, because the other issue is that the way this is easily dismissed by politicians is they say, hey, you don't have to worry about it. We'll just get that GDP ratio up. We'll just get the GDP higher. We're going to create more jobs. We'll get the economy moving, and then the debt's not a problem. It's like a bad business partner. And he keeps telling you, hey, don't worry, I got it under control. And you he doesn't. You can see that there's too much debt. You can see that the money's not coming in, but he's telling you, hey, I'll take care of it. You know what I'm talking about, that guy who's always convincing you, it's okay.
Yeah, and that's the same kind of person that is in need of an intervention by a bunch of family members because they typically have a terrible drug problem, which is making them delusional.
Yeah, well, and delusional is exactly the word. I mean, we're looking at this situation right now where when the credit is downgraded, and a lot of folks don't realize what that means for them, it really has to do with interest rates. That when the credit's downgraded, it's the same as if my credit is poor and I go to get a loan or I go to apply for a credit card or go get a car, I'm going to pay a higher interest rate, which means over the life of that car or that credit card, I'm paying more money in interest.
You're risky. They have to charge more because you are a riskier a loan. That's like health insurance, or home insurance or car insurance. Everything carries risk. There are actuaries that determine how much it's going to cost so that they can make a profit, and that's where it, bless you, by the way, Ben.
Oh, thank you. You know, the other issue is, though, and then this is where folks may not realize it, is they may be thinking to themselves, well, then maybe we can just borrow less money until it comes back up. Right now, our national, not the national debt, but just our deficit for our year-to-year, what we're paying in terms of our budget, is about a $1.7 trillion deficit.
Right.
From year to year. So the Treasury's taking in about $2.4 trillion. But the outgoing, the projected spending is about $3.7 trillion. So when you have $2.4 trillion coming in and $3.7 trillion going out, that means every single year we have well over $1 trillion, about $1.5 trillion in deficit spending, which means it's borrowed money.
Right.
Deficit spending is such a deceptive term. It means that we're not spending deficits. It means that we have $1.7 trillion, over a third of the budget is just borrowed money
now,
every year.
But Ben, you know what's going to come to the rescue? The Buffett rule. Because under the Buffett rule, they're going to take in a whopping $700 billion over 10 years. That's assuming that rich people don't react and not sell their investments because of the capital gains increase. But ignoring that reality, $700 billion. Okay, over 10 years, Ben. And you just pointed out that in 1 year, we blow through an additional borrowed $1.7 trillion.
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem here.
That
you have these political Band-Aids that are not meant to fix any problems.
Nope.
They're just meant to win elections and to sound good. And the Buffett rule
foment class warfare.
Work. It does not work in terms of the big solution here. The other thing is, and this is what they seem to forget, is that under the Buffett rule, it's people who they say, well, you know, they're making $1 million a year or more. But what do they classify that as? Do they classify that as personal income, or is that also small business income? Because if it's small business income, and people, well, a small business, that's still a lot of money. Yeah, it is. But there's also a lot of expenditure that goes out with small businesses that never counts as income.
And
that ultimately means jobs for people.
Jobs, because as we all know, the smallest businesses and the small to medium-sized ones are the real job creators in an economy, not the large ones.
And beware when they say it's only people who make $1 million a year, because they can say that, but then the plan under the Bush tax cuts and the way they have it set up many times is people who make $250,000 to $300,000 a year.
Well, as I think I read this morning, Ben, it's $200,000 and up for individuals, families making $250,000 or more. So $1 million really has nothing to do with reality, as you point out, in Reality Check. Ben, we're going to be watching you, as I always recommend folks doing, Fox 19, Ben Swann. He does a great job, and I love having you on Tuesdays, man. It's good talking to you.
Thanks, Brian. It's a pleasure.
Have a fantastic week. 847-55 KRC, the Talk Station.